Portraits. They're all about capturing people in a moment in time.
How much longer do I have to stay like this for?
Not much longer.
Okay, maybe a few moments in time. There are whole galleries around the globe and right here in Australia dedicated to portraits. There are portrait competitions like the Archibald Prize, and probably the most famous painting in the world is, yep, you guessed it, a portrait.
But why are portraits such a big deal? I think I know someone I can ask.
Wait, where are you going?
Just stay still. Hi Lisa, nice to meet you.
Hello Amelia, welcome to the Art Gallery of South Australia.
When did portraiture become a thing?
Portraiture became very popular from around the 13th century, and interestingly, that's when the word portrait was invented. So it means to show a likeness.
The Middle Ages. Think medieval knights and stuff. After that came the Renaissance, around the 1500s, when artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo did their thing. And people started to value art more than ever before.
So who were the kind of people who were having their portraits painted?
Usually the wealthy and the powerful. Remember that there's no photography to make a permanent image of yourself. So art served as a way of memorialising somebody. People who'd been dead for hundreds of years could still be kind of living on the wall, if that makes sense.
As centuries went on, artists who weren't getting paid the big bucks would paint loved ones, strangers, or their own faces instead. So portraits were no longer just of the rich and famous. Then photography came along and things changed again.
So portrait photography became a booming business. There were photography studios lining all the major capital cities in Australia. Painting had to change. Painting's role was no longer to paint things that looked like life, because that's what photography could do, just like that.
So, Lisa, I have a serious question for you. What about a selfie? Does that count as a portrait?
Oh, good photo. I
It's a good
love
one, isn't it?
It's a very good one. You know, selfies are the ultimate portraits, really, the ultimate self-portraits. And they stand in a long line of portraiture. They're not just something from the 21st century. Artists have been making selfies for a long time. It was just more difficult in the old days.
So why are portraits still relevant today if we have photography and everything?
I think they are ever popular because we are so curious. We are curious about ourselves. We are curious about each other, and we are curious about people who lived a long, long time ago. So when you come into the art gallery, sometimes you can stand in front of a portrait that was made 400 years ago. It's like time traveling.
Well, in that case, Lisa, I'm going to go finish my portrait, I reckon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And it's done. My masterpiece.
I love it.
Okay, that's a really complicated question.
Well, that is a question and a half, and even more so.
A portrait's probably...
Portrait for me is...
It's a snapshot.
I think there's a lot of stories to be told, and you can unlock a lot of stories when you look at a portrait.
I think portraiture is more about the essence of somebody rather than a physical, just a outline of what we kind of tend to think.
No two artists depict the person in exactly the same way. In other words, it's not the same as the camera.
Yeah, good question. The standard reply is it's a picture of the person, whether it's head or the whole body or whatever. But it doesn't need to be that, does it? I think you can learn more about the person through what the artist sees. They perhaps learn more as they're painting.
I couldn't believe the likeness
To do something like the portrait that Laura has painted of me is a fleeting instant. My jaw dropped.
Sometimes you look deeply to another person and you see yourself. It is a connection between two persons in this case. But for any portrait, I think.
A portrait is an artistic representation of a sitter. It's not just their likeness, it's also about their interests, their hobbies, their background, their legacy.
Portrait is a representation of identity fixed in time, so it takes you beyond the surface to really understand what makes an individual tick, where they come from, and how they leave a sense of themselves for posterity.
The pure power of portraiture is that a relationship that was first set up by the artist and the sitter and is there for us all to see.
It could be said that portraiture is the strongest sort of image that we have to deal with, in as much that it's the closest to how we picture ourselves. And as a result, it looks familiar, but it's actually something that is quite strange because of that.
A portrait's probably just simply an image, a painting, a photograph, a drawing, a sculptural bust of an individual human being. You're paying close attention to who that individual is.
A successful portrait is when you, the viewer, get a sense of that connection that's taken place.
It is about summing up who that person is or something specific about them.
I think a portrait is a snapshot of someone at a particular time, at a particular moment, where they've had that meeting, and be it with a painter, a photographer, anyone, and it's that kind of meeting of minds.
The bottom line for me would be that it does look like the person, but trying to be sensitive to how likenesses can emerge in a much more spontaneous or intuitive way.
You get a feeling of the energy the artist is trying to get across. You'll get a feeling of the time as well, the period. Some of the viewers are actually looking at you as if you're actually seeing the scene in front of you.
This is the wonderful portrait of Robert Burns, and that is a picture that everybody thinks they know, but most people know it through prints. If you come and see the portrait itself, you've got an immediate, visceral, thrilling engagement with this extraordinary man.
The portrait gallery is like coming into a great family album. It's about how we capture the sense of what it means to be human through art in all of its facets.
Chuck Close. So I'm a painter, printmaker, and I was an only child. What I did to get people to stay around me was entertain the troops. So I did magic shows, and with the Magic Act, I broke the cardinal rule of magicianship, and as soon as I did a trick, I would show everybody how I did the trick, which is supposed to destroy the illusion and ruin it. I didn't think that happened. I thought it just gave them another layer of meaning. And that's become more or less the modus operandi of all of my art. I'll make something and I'll show you how I made it. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I was plagued with neuromuscular problems. I couldn't run. I couldn't throw a ball, catch a ball. I was very severely learning disabled, and I didn't know anyone in my classes because I'm face blind. I think it put me in good stead for when I became a quadriplegic. I was so used to having problems and coping with them and overcoming them. So quadriplegia was just one more hurdle. So I sort of waltzed through high school with the dumb kids. When I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had met this woman in my church whose husband ran the art department in the local junior college. And she said, you can get in there, it's open enrollment. And then once you're there, you can prove yourself. So I got to Everett Junior College, and I did exceedingly well. And then when I got to the University of Washington, I was the compromised candidate for the Yale Summer School of Music and Art, and is essentially out-of-town tryouts for Yale. So I think I'm painting heads. I don't think I'm painting portraits. A portrait is about the person. I'm not that interested in telling a story about the person. This is what interests me. I draw me because I'm around. I paint me because I'm around. And every time fashions change or my hair disappears or my beard turns white, I have a new subject. And I don't do commissions, and I only paint friends and family and fellow artists. So they're all images that matter to me. And some images are more compelling than others. I recycle almost everything I use. It's almost like a high school lab science experiment in which you need something constant. And if that's constant, then you can see the impact of the choices that you've made. So when I pump that image through a new medium, whether it's fingerprints or pulp paper or diagonal lines or whatever it is, I can see just how important those decisions were. This is a tapestry. It's woven in Bruges, Belgium. Tapestries used to take years. They were really incredibly sought after, and they were trying to figure out how to speed the process up. So they came up with a system in which pieces of cardboard had holes punched in them. And those went into the loom, and there were rods that were attached to lifters that lifted the threads up. And if the rod hit the cardboard, those threads stayed down. The ones that went through the holes were lifted. And this was called a jacquard tapestry. I'm just glad that I made a tapestry while he was still alive. It's one of my absolute favorites. So I'm doing 10 mosaics for the new 2nd Avenue subway line. And each one is going to be different, and it's going to reflect the ridership in the subway, so that the people that you got off the subway with is reflected in the portraits upstairs. They all are artists, but people won't know that. You can see how red, blue, and yellow stack up on top of each other and make these complicated colors, or especially the browns and the grays. And you see little flashes of the color coming through, which is what I'm doing now with these oil paintings, where you can see the strokes laying on top of each other. What happens when blue goes over, and you have little chunks of pink sticking out. There you have blue and green sticking out. But everything is made with just 3 colors, which is a hoot. Years ago, I made full color paintings, continuous tone, and they were just magenta, cyan, and yellow. I can show you in a book. And here's a painting in progress. You see the eyes are red, add the blue, it becomes purple, add the yellow. So that's documenting the making of a painting from start to finish. If you wait around to be inspired, you might never make anything. And sitting around waiting to be inspired means that you're trying to dream up a great art idea. They don't happen that way. Everything comes out of work itself. You make something and pretty soon it evolves into something else. Or it kicks open a door and you go through that, you don't like it, you back up, try another way. Well, painting is the most magical of all mediums. It transcends its physical reality, it makes space where there is none, and it's colored dirt rubbed on a piece of cloth wrapped around some wooden stretchers. If you're an artist, and when I say inspiration is for amateurs, the rest of us just show up and get to work, because everything grows out of work, even magic.
Today we're going to be doing an art project in the style of famous artist Chuck Close. But first, let's dive into the life and story of Chuck Close and his art. Chuck Close is a master at mixing and making colors and is famous for his larger-than-life portraits. Chuck Close believes that true art needs to be difficult, that the artist needs to suffer to truly have greatness. This is very evident throughout his work. He always likes to make it hard on himself. This is reason he mostly paints portraits. Chuck Close suffers from face blindness. His brain cannot see the distinguishing factors that separate one face from another. He wanted to overcome this problem in his life, so he started painting faces. To do this, he uses a grid system. He draws the grid on the photo and then paints what he sees in just that individual box. Chuck Close's art really took off in 1967. His early work inspired the inkjet printer. He would take red, blue, and yellow markers and scribble until the colors he wanted came through. The inkjet printer does this same concept, but with tiny drops of ink.
Art amazing, and I haven't even told you the best part about it. All of Chuck Close's art is enormous. Most of it comes in between 70 inches and 100 inches, both tall and wide. To put this in perspective, I'm kind of a tall guy at 6'4" but 6'4" is only 76 inches. I'm standing in a hallway. This is a normal size hallway with an 8-foot ceiling, like most of you have in your homes. 8-foot ceiling is 96 inches. Most of his art is taller and wider than the hallway that I'm standing in right now.
Soon he grew tired of painting with markers and paintbrushes, so he threw away all his tools and started finger painting, using a dot method. Here is an example of this type of painting. In 1988, Chuck Close had a tragedy strike his life. An artery in his spine collapsed, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. This did not stop him from creating art. He created these special clips that go on his hands to hold his brush, and now he works a lot of color, mixing them on the canvases so that up close the picture is lost, but step back and it is very evident. He redesigned his workspace to accommodate his disability. Chuck Close truly is an amazing man. We are going to be doing an art project that has elements of this grid style coloring in a self-portrait. Step 1. Take a selfie. Crop that selfie to just show your face. If you would like to change the colors or things like that, feel free to do so. We will only be focusing on major outlines, such as the face, hair, nose, eyes, and ears. Draw these major outlines. Make sure not to shade or fill in the dark shapes. Just draw the outlines of everything. Your picture should look something like this. Step 2. Outline your drawing with a black marker so it can be seen. Step 3. Using a ruler and a pencil, draw a grid of 1-inch squares across the whole drawing, even over the picture. Make sure to use only light pressure so that the grid won't show up very dark. Step 4. Draw shapes or designs inside each box. You can do this randomly or by some sort of pattern. I have seen words and names drawn in and they end up looking pretty nice. Whatever you do, make sure to fill up each square. Step 5. The final step is to color your picture. To do this, you need to get 2 colors for your hair, 2 different colors for your skin, 2 different colors for your clothing, and 2 different colors for the background. You are then going to color both colors per box in each section. Try to alternate the colors so that you don't get a mass section of the same color. If a box shares 2 different sections, for example, skin and background, make sure you color the background portion of that box with the background colors and the skin portion of that box with the skin colors. Here are some examples of students' work, as well as an example of the one I did myself with the original picture next to it.
Today we're going to draw from a photograph using the grid method, and I'm going to show you how to do that using a ruler, a dark pencil or marker, and a piece of paper. This little small 3 by 4 inch piece of paper is going to serve as our stencil. I'm marking the 3-inch side at the 1 inch and 2 inch measurements, and again on the bottom 1 and 2 inches. And then on the side I'm going to mark again at the 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch measurements, and again at 1, 2, and 3. It's important that you measure the same on the side and the top because you want to have squares for your grid. I'm using my paper to place over the part of my photo that I want to draw, and that's the only part of my photo that I'm going to end up with in my final drawing. I am using a pencil, which is what you would use. It's easy to see when you are up close to it. From the video you can't see very well, so I'm using a marker. You do not need to use a marker, but you can if you're having trouble seeing what you're doing. So this is me getting a marker. I'm outlining again my stencil paper and marking it darker so you can see in the video. The reason I chose a 3 by 4 paper as my stencil is because it is exactly the same ratio as the paper I chose, which is 9 by 12. 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 times 4 is 12. Little math for you, just trust me on this one. Now I'm connecting the lines that I drew earlier, the marks at each inch, using my ruler, and I end up with 12 equal size squares. The face inside of the rectangle is what I'm going to draw on my larger paper. Instead of marking at every inch now, I'm going to mark at every 1/3 inch because my paper is exactly 3 times the size of my stencil. Again, trust me on this. You are going to mark at the 3 inches and the 6 inches. 3 and 6. Then on the bottom, the short side, 3 and 6. On the 12-inch side, I'm marking at the 3, the 6, and the 9. And again on the other side, I'm marking at 3, 6, and 9, multiples of 3. I did this darker than you will do it. You will actually do it lighter, so you don't end up seeing these marks. And then you can also draw your lines as lightly as you'd like. It will be harder to erase them, and you might not want to see them in your painting or your drawing in the final drawing. Okay, I'm now left with 12 squares, which each square on my grid is going to correspond to the grid in my photo. I'm now speeding up the video a little bit because you don't want to watch 10 minutes of me drawing. But notice I am going into each square and I'm only looking at what's inside of that square on the grid. And I'm only drawing the basic details. It actually helps to go in and actually draw on the photo by outlining. Notice I'm outlining the side of my face on the photo, and that way I have some muscle memory going in my hand. Oops, I went off camera a little bit. I'm outlining the shape of where my neck meets my hair. I'm outlining the shape of what my eye is doing. And of course, you can always go back and fix anything that is a little bit off. Sometimes our mind plays tricks on us and we imagine something's bigger or smaller than it is, but in reality, it isn't. So the grid is actually a good way to keep track of what the size something actually is. I think there is a tendency to draw eyes bigger than they are in real life, and a tendency to draw noses smaller. Often we don't leave enough space for the forehead. I don't know why I just colored in those pupils. I think that's just a habit of mine, but we are actually going to be painting these for this project, and you're going to want to leave the space inside of your face in this portrait, leave every shape blank so that you're not left with graphite mixing into your paint. Here comes the hard part. I chose a photo with my teeth showing. Teeth are difficult to draw without making them look like fangs or buck teeth. I did my best. I usually prefer to draw myself with my mouth closed just to avoid that situation. But that's all we have, folks. So notice I just did a simple outline of the shapes of my face. I didn't shade anything in. I didn't add color or a lot of detail. That's because we're basically creating an area to paint within for this project. Thank you very much.